So just putting it out there.
It's my first time being on a panel, so putting that out there.
Okay, cool. And okay, it looks like hopefully we should be live.
Yeah.
Sweet. I'll just get going then. So hi and welcome to Managing Mental Health in Challenging Times, a discussion panel that aims to share stories and strategies on supporting positive mental health for those in the music industry. As we all know, many people working in music and the arts are facing big challenges right now, whether it's job losses, lack of opportunities to play live, freelance work drying up, restrictions making it impossible to meet or collaborate, and so on. We all deal with these issues in our own ways, and it can be inspiring to hear how others maintain positive mental health. So I'm delighted to introduce you to today's panelists. So I'm just going to go around and let you all say a little bit about yourselves, starting with Elle first.
Hi, so I'm Elle. I was a freelance singer for about 7 years, and now I work at the Warren, which is a youth project based in Hull, and we run a project called 3 Minute Heroes, which is a music and mental health project for young people, secondary school age up until 25.
Awesome. And Joe, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Joe. I'm the head of Music Minds Matter at Help Musicians. So I was heavily involved in building the Music Minds Matter service. I was previously a composer. I worked in film mainly, and I trained as a therapist for about 4 years as well. So I kind of brought the two things together working for the charity. We also run a hearing health scheme, and we have a range of other services, including creative development grants and lots of other things as well, which I can talk about as we go along.
Yeah, cool. I've actually done that hearing health thing as well. So
okay,
thanks for sorting that out. Right. So next we have Menno.
Hi, I'm Menno. I'm from Toronto in Canada, but I'm presently in Newfoundland, Canada, on tour. I've been a touring musician for over 20 years, played in most countries, and during that time I also started an independent record label. We signed bands like Mac DeMarco, Always, a lot of Canadian indie stuff, Orville Peck, and a couple years ago, I started a mental health fund for all the bands on our label, where all the bands have access to a budget of non-recoupable money to be used for their mental health care when they're on the road, or like, you know, people have even used it to go to the dentist if they really need to, because it's all kind of connected. It's one of the first, I think it's, as far as I know, it's kind of the first of its kind, and it still is, even though I've done 100 panels where a whole bunch of labels have patted me on the back and said, that's such a great idea, everyone should do that. No one has.
Thanks, Menno. And I'll introduce myself as well. So I'm Estella. I play bass guitar in Big Joni and lead guitar in Trumpet. I also organise year-round with the music charity Girls Rock London, which encourages women and people from marginalised genders to create music. And I'm on the board for the Good Night Out campaign, which seeks to make safer nightlife spaces and just think about how people are being treated in venues. And I'm on the organising team for Decolonise Fest, which is a music festival by punks of colour for punks of colour. And I'm chairing this panel tonight. So before we get going, I also want to say a big thanks to everyone involved in curating this week's Yorkshire Music Forum convention, which includes the Yorkshire Music Forum Consortium of Come Play With Me, YMF Digital, Higher Rhythm, Arnold Brown Limited, and Music Leads in collaboration with Launchpad. So the Yorkshire Music Forum is a PRS Foundation talent development partner, and this event is supported by the BPI, which is the British Phonographic Industry, as well as youth music with public funding from the National Lottery through Arts Council England, Leeds 2023, Arts at Leeds, and Leeds City Council through Launchpad. So you can find out about all the other talks that are happening this week as part of this year's convention through the links in the comments. So I think there should be a link coming up there soon. And you can also, if you're watching this on the Launchpad Facebook page, please be aware that closed captioning is available. And I think there's going to be a link to that soon, so you can head over there if you want the closed captions. So I feel like I've already been talking for quite a bit, but this event isn't just about what I and the panelists have to say. We're also really interested in hearing questions and input from any of you who are watching tonight. So please do send us your thoughts using the comments section. Cool. So to start, this has been such an extremely unpredictable year, with the music industry just being shaken to its core, really, by the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. On World Mental Health Day last month, NME magazine reported that musicians and road crew are experiencing a marked increase in depression and anxiety. So these tend to be the most talked about aspects. I did see in another report that anxiety and depression are most commonly experienced, or are the most commonly experienced negative emotions in relation to music creation. But this isn't to exclude other issues such as OCD and co-occurring issues such as substance abuse, which for many people have also been exacerbated by the pandemic. But for my first question, I do want to ask for each panelist in your respective fields, are there particular recurring themes that you're coming across or have been approached about regarding the mental health of those you work with or assist? And I did want to put this to Joe first, seeing as Help Musicians focuses specifically on the mental health of those working in the music industry. So again, it was just to ask if there's anything in particular that's been coming up quite frequently for you, Joe, working with Help Musicians?
Yeah, certainly. So obviously the past 8, 9, can't remember how many months now, has somewhat altered the kind of the sort of optics of people's lived experience who work in music, and that's something that we experienced in unfortunately a large number previously, but there was kind of manageable historically, was people who were experiencing, life challenges or career challenges, and the impact of that for a workforce in music, which is 75%, I think, freelance, is huge potentially. And we've seen for a long time the very difficult situations that people sometimes find themselves in, and supporting people at times of crisis in large numbers. But what we've seen over the last 8 months is a lot more people who are in very difficult, vulnerable situations. There are people who early on in lockdown weren't receiving any state assistance. There are people who still aren't able to receive, who are only able to receive universal credit and small amounts of state assistance. So the impact of the kind of financial circumstances that people are living through now is we've seen obviously through the nearly 20,000 people who've applied through our hardship fund. We've seen the impact of this situation have a very serious and negative impact on people's lives and careers, and we've been able to survey people who've applied through the hardship fund to look at what their particular challenges are. But needless to say, the main issue early on was financial, because people were in a very distinct and unique situation as a result of the hardship that they found themselves in. And what we're starting to see now is the impact of those experiences potentially on people who maybe are finding it particularly difficult, or who've got particularly challenging circumstances is major. And we're seeing larger numbers of people who are unfortunately experiencing what we used to see before the pandemic, in smaller numbers, certainly. So there's been a marked increase in people having very negative emotional and mental health experiences. But that being said, that this isn't new, and it's something that through the research that we've done over the years and through our insights, we know has been a particular challenge for people in working in the sector. So that's why Music Minds Matter exists. So it's a service that's free for people to use, and what we see in terms of the patterns of people using that service is that actually the majority of people don't call the service because they want access to counselling. They call the service to talk about something they're finding difficult, and then a significant minority of people, that their challenges are such that there is need, and there will be benefit in them accessing counselling. You could argue that most people would benefit from some talking therapies, but the service at the front line offers people that, so you can talk to someone for an hour about a challenge, and you can call back another time and talk to them about something else that you're experiencing. And actually the majority of people really benefit from that, and that was something that was quite surprising to me, because when we did the research 3 years ago, when we set up the service, I was expecting the majority of people to want access to counselling and to be accessing counselling, but we haven't seen that. We've seen, nevertheless, there is still a significant number of people who are accessing counselling through the service, and it's obviously having a positive impact. But that's what we've seen over the last 3 years, and over the last 8 or 9 months. Sorry, this is a very long answer. Over the last 8 or 9 months, we've seen larger numbers of people having very negative emotional experiences for very clear and obvious reasons.
And just to confirm, so Music Minds Matter is the 24-hour telephone service that's available for support for help musicians. Is that right?
Yes, sorry, I should have said that. Thanks, because I realised that I missed that. So it's a 24/7 service, and it's available to anyone working in the sector. If as part of the conversation, there's an assessment made, and it looks like you would benefit from access to some therapies. Then there's an assessment process and some eligibility that takes you through to a sort of second phase, and then they will try and match up professional musicians with therapists around the UK.
Okay, that's great. And did anyone else want to jump in just to repeat the question, just discussing if there's any particular recurring themes that you're coming across at the moment regarding mental health in the current COVID-19 pandemic?
I mean, basically the same things that Joe said. There is definitely some recurrent themes, but the ones that I've noticed is kind of a sense of just hopelessness with a lot of bands who, especially the ones in kind of the middle class, the ones who were able to not work another job, didn't have to work at a coffee shop or some part-time work, and were just at that level where they were sustaining themselves by a full touring and recording schedule. So those kind of bands where it's such a step back and there's no end in sight, and some of them financially are just not able to, they might not be able to come back from it. It's just such a setback that can be really discouraging. And definitely with people I work with, I've seen a definite uptake in the use of the mental health fund. Everyone's maxing it out, and not everybody, but it's being used more than it ever has. And an increase of musicians, with idle time on their hands. It's kind of a musician's worst enemy when it comes to, especially drinking too much or partying too much. So a lot of people had a quite the summer, especially Canada, handing out $2,000 a month is more than some of these bands made before, and no shows to play. So a lot of people partied away their summer, and it's kind of catching up now. And I'm not judging or blaming at all. I'm just saying that's a situation that I've seen a few times.
Yeah, and just for the audience as well. So you mentioned the mental health fund, which you spoke to us about briefly before we started this broadcast. But if you could just let everybody else know as well about that.
So it's just basically, it's a funded label started it provides each artist on the label, it's not a lot, it's $1,500 Canadian for each album cycle that can be used towards like mental health services. It's all confidential. I don't know who's using it. It just goes straight to accounting, and then they take out the money and get reimbursed. And but even though it's confidential, I've had many artists reach out to me personally and say, "Thank you, this has really helped," and they're not shy about telling me what they're using it for. Everything from medication to therapies to addiction treatment to one asked me if they could use it on a dentist's appointment. And I'm not going to say no. The money's there for you to take care of yourself on tour, if you can't afford it. So that's what it is.
Great, thanks. And did you want to weigh in on this topic as well, Al?
Yeah, so I think obviously I'm a bit different because I work for a youth charity predominantly. We just happen to have a really big creative music element in our charity. So we have an independent record label, Warren Records. We also have kind of rehearsal rooms in a recording studio that anyone between 16 and 25 can use for free. And obviously when lockdown happened, that service was completely stopped. Our kind of resources went into feeding young people and making sure that they were all right. So we started kind of delivering food parcels through lockdown. And I think the hardest thing to see is young people who we've been working with who are really creative, are really driven. We also kind of help them get on their first kind of step into the music industry. And before COVID, they were like doing really well, writing loads of music, getting in the recording studio, recording albums, amazing. And then the creativity is just completely dropped. Their drive is dropped. They find themselves kind of stumped creatively. They're like, I've not written anything for ages. And then there's this vicious cycle of, why haven't I written something? And then they put themselves down and then they can't get out of that. And then they can't write more. And it's really sad to see, because before COVID, they were like full of fire in their bellies. And now that's kind of been extinguished, which is really sad. And we're trying to kind of put things together, programs together to get that fire back. But because of the situation changing constantly, it feels like you organize something and then we can't use the studio again. And it's really, really difficult.
There's something so true about the fire and the reward of getting to play a live show or getting to like record your song and hearing the finished product. Without those positive reinforcements, there's such a big part of like people's drive. You see bands who tour for years for no money. I mean, it's because they love that interaction with the audience and seeing how people react to their music. It's so clear that is such a big part of what makes it doable. So that makes sense.
Yeah, that actually fits in really well with what I did want to speak about next, which was one thing in the report that I mentioned earlier. They talked about the loss of identity in having our lifestyles being uprooted by this pandemic, which could be, for example, if your life has predominantly been about performance, constantly touring, etc. To have that suddenly taken away with no clear timeline for its return could be really debilitating. So I did want to ask if that's something you've either personally experienced or been approached about over these past few months. I'm not sure who wanted to go first on that one.
I could.
Yeah.
I mean, I've just heard that so many times that, that's people's identity and so important. They're like, especially kind of what I touched on before, the people who like, you work so hard, and no offense to someone working at a coffee shop, but they work so hard as a musician. So they don't have that. They want to be identified as a musician. They're working so hard to be like, yeah, I'm a musician. And when you have to go back to working at a job or at the grocery store, and your friends see you and they all know that. And it's a real bruise to a lot of egos that like, oh yeah, I'm a grocery clerk again. That's, I mean, you couldn't be more right with how the effect on people's identity.
Yeah, I was going to say, we've seen record numbers of musicians applying for creative development grants through a range of funds, and I think, you know, whilst that's really positive, obviously, because it means that we're supporting more musicians in the kind of in developing projects and you know and building and being creative. It also shows that there is a, you know, a heightened need because of this, obviously, because of this, the circumstances that people are living through. The other thing that I didn't mention before that I just wanted to say in terms of the hardship fund that we've been running, one of the major things that people have been feeding back is about the kind of the uncertainty of these times and how that is like inhibiting their ability to think aspirationally and creatively, and to be, you know, to be in that kind of zone that they want to be potentially. So regardless of the fact that people aren't performing and aren't able to have those connections with audiences and with, you know, and just the kind of the experience of being in venues and being being around people who are hopefully enjoying what you're doing. The uncertainty of these times is also potentially an inhibitor. Well, it is an inhibitor to people feeling, you know, positive about being creative, and that's something that, you know, that we in a small part are trying to support through you know, developing and supporting people to build projects and to think creatively at a time where we know it's difficult, and through using the range of our services, including Music Minds Matter and, you know, and through the hardship fund, hopefully people are able to find some level of balance in this very difficult period that we're living through. You know, it's difficult for everyone, but, you know, I think a lot of musicians have been hit particularly hard by this, and I can totally understand the levels of uncertainty about the future, because, you know, at times, certainly in the past, and still to a certain extent, even though, you know, Mena, you're about to perform at a socially distanced gig, which is amazing. That's probably a fairly remote and unique circumstance. You know, I can see why musicians at the moment are thinking, when is this going to end, and how is this going to improve? You know, and how long are we going to be in this situation? And that's obviously going to be difficult for people to manage emotionally and mentally, and that's the worst thing for someone who is potentially wanting to spend time being creative. But that being said, a small glimmer of hope is that we are seeing people who are feeding back to us that actually they have found some of this downtime beneficial to them being creative, and whilst they're a minority of in terms of the overall feedback we're getting, it does suggest that there's potential in those situations to look at what people have been doing and try and support others to find that space themselves as well, because I think I think it's understandably challenging to try and do things that are creative and try and feel inspired in everything that we're living through. But you know, if people are doing that, then it does suggest that there's potential for us to try and support other people to find that space as well. Just trying to be a bit positive. Sorry.
No, that's good. I did think it was cool to see companies like Ableton made their free trial, like it used to be 30 days and then it went to 90 days and now it's like 180 days, so people can like learn to use the full Ableton suite in lockdown.
That's cool.
Like that. Yeah.
I wish Pro Tools would do that.
Yeah. But and yeah, I was wondering, Elle, because you work with a youth project, have you, like, in the last question you kind of mentioned those creative spaces having to close, but have you found kind of alternative ways to keep young people kind of like motivated creatively during this time?
Yeah, well, we started off obviously in the very beginning of lockdown. We tried to move everything digitally. So I teach singing, so I was doing kind of online singing, which is very hard, online singing lessons, and kind of recording tutorials, and then like our studio manager would record how you use Ableton and stuff like that. But then we found that a lot of the young people we work with don't have access to technology. They don't have Wi-Fi in their houses. They don't have laptops. They don't have, you know, beat pads and stuff like that. So that was really difficult. We were moving away from the cohort of young people we usually kind of work with, majority of young people we work with, and targeting another group of young people, which is amazing, but we didn't want to leave the other group behind. So when it started to ease a little bit, we created a art project in the city called Art of the City, where we met socially distanced, and we got local artists, so we supported local artists with work to teach their art skills, and we created art using the Hull as our kind of backdrop. So we're trying to kind of find ways to reach young people and keep them creating. And, you know, like 3 Minute Heroes is a project that teaches people to use creative writing, young people to use creative writing to get everything kind of out of their heads. And then what we do is we take those writings, anonymize them, and give them to local bands, and then they make music, and we make albums out of the writings from young people. So we really try and kind of teach them skills, teach young people skills we work with in creative writing, so they can go away and use those skills when they're at home. So we kept kind of reminding them when we were calling them and talking to them, like, you know, you might be feeling bad today, but just write it down, do some exercise, go outside, just do something that'll get you out of this rut, because if you just sit in this rut, you're just going to continue to stay there. And so, yeah, we tried as a charity to reach as many people as possible, and because we're quite creative, and all of kind of our projects are creative, we tried to just tweak them a little bit so they were reachable in lockdown.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like, I really like the way that especially like kind of youth charities have worked to keep people feeling connected during this time. I think we had a similar experience at Girls Rock London. You know, usually we would have an in-person rock camp over the summer that obviously couldn't take place, but instead we created these kind of like summer workbook kind of things, like packages that we sent out to young people so they could be creative at home. They like sent us some postcards of things they were working on. We had like online stuff to do as well. And I think, yeah, it's really important that not all of it is online, because like you said, for some people access is an issue. And I think being creative of ways that we can meet when we're allowed to meet socially distanced, when we're not as heavily locked down as we are now, is a really useful way of kind of keeping people feeling connected and positive. So yeah, hopefully we'll be out of, I can't remember which tier we're in now, tier 3 or tier 2, whatever's going on. Maybe we'll it'll lighten up here a bit. So yeah, I did want to move on to speak about the announcement of the impending vaccine, because I guess that does give us some hope that a semblance of normality is on the horizon. But going forward, what steps would any of you like to see taken to ensure that good mental health is prioritized within the music industry? And like, I feel like I've had some great examples already, but yeah, I'll start with Elle, if there was any thoughts that you had on
that. It's really difficult, because I think it's amazing that we have this kind of glimmer of hope, and part of me wants to be like, yes, let's just ride with that. Soon in the spring we'll be back kind of in mosh pits together, and it'll be fine. But you know, there's equally a worry that musicians and freelancers are going to hold on to that, and if it doesn't happen, then their mental health will take a dive. And as much as I try and be as positive as possible, yeah, I really hope that it comes, and because I know personally, I go to the theatre a lot and go to gigs a lot, and it really helps me really with my mental health. So yeah, I hope that it works out.
So cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, and what about you, Manu?
I mean, one thing I'd like to see going forward, to be honest, is more people who are making money off musicians on tour putting putting money where their mouth is, and it doesn't have to be a lot. But I mean, I don't know how it is in the UK if NHS covers. Do they cover like therapy services or like?
You can get things like CBT or and some counselling. Often there's a very long waiting list, and it's not kind of necessarily ongoing. You might only get a certain amount of sessions.
Right.
Like.
So, I mean, and I know certainly in the US, you know, nothing's covered, which is absurd. But there's so many people in the ecosystem who are making money off musicians on the road, and it's a hazardous workplace. I'm not making excuses. You know, these are people who like have a certain personality who are going into the arts, people who like to experience a lot, people who who feel a lot and have, you know, and they're sent on the road touring, you know, displaying themselves every night to critics who one day tell them they're the greatest and the other day tell them they're total shit. And you're surrounded by drugs and alcohol and people who want to give it to you all the time. You know, it's late nights. There's no, you know, usually you don't have your partner on the road or your friends or your family or your support, your home core support network isn't there. And I'm not complaining. It's an incredible job and you're lucky to do it, but it does have dangers that are associated with it. And I just want them to be acknowledged and people to be, you know, I love the rock and roll lifestyle too. You know, that's part of the acclaim. I'm not trying to say like that needs to stop, but I want bands to realize like, hey, you should try and take care of yourself. And if you want to, here are some tools that people use and just like, you know, basic access to services that they wouldn't be able to afford. And if you need to call someone from the road, you can do this or things like that. And that stuff costs money and the bands aren't going to pay for it, you know, but I find it kind of, you know, I love our distributor, you know, Universal Records in Canada. They're wonderful people who work there, and but each one of them at their desk has health insurance, and they can go to the dentist when they're feeling ill, or they can go to they can see a certain amount of therapy a year of their own private person who they go to, who they choose, and they have a relationship with. They just submit the receipt, and it comes back, and you know, that's great. I'm not saying take that away. They should have that. But the fact that Universal has all these artists on the road and doesn't realize that like they're employees too. They're making money for this company. This company would not exist without these people doing this. Why don't they get health insurance? And it's not that it's completely unheard of. Like ACTRA or SAG, I don't know what that is in the UK, the Screen Actors Guild in the US, and ACTRA in Canada, they have that. It's the union that the musicians in and that the actors are in, and you have access to buy into a health insurance plan that makes it affordable, and part of your paycheck goes off, and also part of the production's paycheck comes off and goes into a fund to help you take care of yourself. So to me, it's like if everyone chipped in a little bit, you know, the managers, the booking agents, the promoters, the ticket sellers, the venues, the labels, if we all just put in, and the musicians too, like a tiny bit of their paycheck, everyone just chipped in a tiny little bit, it wouldn't kill anyone's bottom line. And you could provide, you know, a buy-in situation that was affordable to musicians on the road, where like, you know, just general health coverage that's just kind of basic at most jobs. Yeah, it's that's what I want.
I do think like it might feel like kind of a small thing that happens on the road, but I did notice the difference between touring, say, in mainland Europe and in the UK, like how like you might be on the road all day, but then in Europe, like they'll expect you to like just sit down and like have a hot meal before you're going to perform on stage. Whereas in the UK, it would just be like loads of red stripe and like no food, and like it's
totally.
and it doesn't help you to stay healthy on the road. So
it's so civilized, especially in France. Germany's great, but I love that in France when you sit down and you do your loading, do a bit of sound check, and everyone sits down and has a meal together, has a glass of wine with their meal. It's very civilized, as opposed to like, yeah, so many venues in America, you know, or in Canada and UK. You get there, they're like, "You guys hungry? Well, maybe there'll be pizza later, but like, here's a beer for now," and like just like start drinking during sound check. And it's just a different kind of attitude. It's like, all right, get to work, as opposed to like that, like, okay, we're doing a job together, we're all employees, we're all having a lunch break and getting to know each other. That attitude is so refreshing. I love it. I wish it could be in more.
Yeah, I love the fact that it's the whole crew as well, like whoever's on sound or lighting, whatever, not just artists as well. So I think that's really important.
I've made so many friends at those dinners around the world, like a sound guy in Paris or a lighting person in Marseille, like all these. It's wonderful. I mean, that would bring me to one of the. I think we're going to talk about it later. So stop.
Oh yeah, I am going to bring it up later. But and yeah, just quickly, Joe, as well. Did you have any thoughts about what you'd like to see happening to make sure that good mental health is prioritised in the music industry going forward?
Well, I agree with everything that Menno said. Actually, I think that I've been fortunate over the last few years to be quite heavily involved in a lot of the conversations that are happening in the UK with the trade bodies and with other organisations like Music Support and BAPAM, and there are lots of organisations who have moved into areas to focus on supporting well-being for musicians and for crew and for the music managers and for other people who work in the sector. And I think that's something that's been really refreshing to be part of. And like I say, we've been fortunate to be very heavily involved in a lot of those conversations. And whilst I can't talk too much about our plans because they're still developing, we a lot of what Menno was talking about, we're having conversations about at the moment with partners. So we're looking at how we can support people to kind of proactively manage some of the things that are common in people's experience working in music, what kind of resources we can build to do that, and how we can forge that through kind of inward investment from lots of different areas of the industry. So it's early stages, but I think there's a lot to be positive about what can be achieved over the next 12 to 18 months from a fairly decent start over the last 3 years. I think there's a lot more that can be done, and I think how that works best is if you can communicate and reach the people who maybe don't realize that there are beneficial resources out there because they feel okay. If you can reach those people alongside people who are at any point on a spectrum of kind of imbalance or balance, then you're doing the right kind of things, and you're getting to a point where sorry, my son's just walked in naked and distracted me. You can get to you can. So I'm trying to make a serious point, and then I saw my son there. So yeah, but I think if the more that these conversations are happening, and the more collaboration that's happening with a lot of the trade bodies in the UK, I think that the better the chances are that we reach those people who. Because I think everyone can benefit from thinking a little bit more about the things that they maybe normally ignore. Because it doesn't take much for something that seems really minor to potentially have quite an impact if something else outside of your control affects you. So I think the industry's kind of it's febrile, and there's lots of really interesting and amazing things about it, and lots of really enjoyable experiences that can be really varied. But it can also mean leave people feeling vulnerable, and it can also leave people in difficult situations. And I think that the more that we can support people, because there isn't going to be a certainly in the UK, there isn't going to be one central place where everyone can go to and access everything that you might get through a really enlightened employer, say. So the more that we can work together to make sure that people have the resources and the things that they need to that they can benefit from thinking about, that will reduce the potential for things to really impact them. I'd say that's where we're looking to go and what we're trying to do with partners.
That's cool. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that work coming through in the next, I guess, 12 to 18 months, like you mentioned. And kind of one question I wanted to squeeze in before we start moving on to audience questions was whether or not you think we're moving away from the stereotype of like the substance abusing musician and the kind of glorification of that in the music world. And do you still see this stereotype as having an impact on people's mental health in the industry today? I think maybe Menno, you were touching upon it earlier, so I'll put it to you first.
I think there's certainly the glorification is not like it used to be, but the kind of the glorification it came about very honestly. I don't think it's something like, oh, glorifying like drugs and alcohol, like, and the rock and roll lifestyle. It's a thing that just exists, and these people are also making incredible art at the same time, and they get tied together, and and so the fact that it exists, I think a lot more, and I'm seeing it a lot more with young bands I work with and stuff, who really are trying to look out for each other. The newer generation, they see the risks and maybe don't want to end up like their parents' generation of bands. I am seeing it more, but the framework still is there. The conditions where that arises, it's just there. You're in a bar every night. You're having fun. You're going to parties. So it really takes an effort to know where the line is.
Cool. Did Joe or Elle want to make any comments as well?
I'd say that I've seen a significant shift, I think, in terms of people's the way people interact with substances. And I say that I come from I trained as a substance misuse therapist, so I worked a lot in prisons and in the community, working with people who are rough sleeping, and so when I kind of came back into music to a certain extent. Obviously, it was slightly jaundiced my experience, because I'd been working with people who are very chaotically entrenched in substance use. But one of the things that I've noticed over the last 5 years, certainly in terms of even in the research, is when we ask questions about substance use, people are often more open about their substance and alcohol use, but it's actually it's looking less common that it's something that's a daily experience for people in terms of our insights. That's not to say that people aren't still, that there aren't still lots of examples of people who are potentially managing really difficult, relationships with alcohol and substances. But I do think there's a kind of a cycle of change happening, and that doesn't mean that everyone's going to stop drinking. Nor do I think that should happen. That doesn't mean that everyone's going to stop drinking and potentially using substances. But I think maybe safe usage is becoming more common. And again, I think there's a long way to go with that. I'm not saying we're in a position where everything is brilliant and everyone's enlightened and everyone knows the limits. But I think and it's another aspect of something, imbalances can happen anywhere, and if it could be some pain at a gig that potentially leads to someone experiencing something very difficult and potentially becoming reliant on a painkiller or a substance, or these things do exist, and they're part of the the kind of a level of lawlessness in the field potentially. And I think that's where really good resources can potentially change the way that people are thinking about these things. Sorry, I'll keep talking about this thing that we're going to be working on.
Yeah, I want to add one thing, like, with the state of music now, and there being a kind of such a big, like, lower middle class in music that's like just barely hanging on the poverty line. Like, we don't have, we still have rock stars, but like, it's a little tougher to pull it off, to be a full-blown train wreck. It's like people, you're doing so much of it yourselves, and which, people get good at, letting it bubble under the surface and stuff like that. Like a lot of people I know are really good, and myself included at times, like at functioning, being functioning at a level that you shouldn't be, as opposed to like, oh, that guy needs rehab right now. Like, what a mess. Like, there's not people aren't rich enough, and like they can't really get away with that where it's so obvious. So, like, but just people with functioning, like alcoholism or like substance problems, like that often takes a little longer to notice, because you're like, oh, they're fine. Like, it's like, yeah, they're handling it, like, oh yeah, they get messed up, like, but like, nah, they're fine. They get to work the next day. They drive the van. It's whatever. It's fine. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Mm-hmm. And I know we're just about to move into audience questions, so I wanted to put this last point to Elle first, but do you have any quick strategies you could recommend to our audience when it comes to taking care of our mental health at the moment?
I mean, I can only speak for what's working for me personally, and I think that is I do yoga every day. I used to do yoga before, but like I used to tap in and out of it. I do yoga every single day. I run now. I didn't used to run before. So basically just getting outside, doing something, burning off the energy that you have. And I do try and be as creative as possible. I find that the things I used to do creatively, like I write a lot of scripts and plays and stuff like that. I've had kind of no ideas or drive to do that, but I'm kind of trying to throw myself into other things creatively that are a new skill. And I think because it's new, I'm excited to do it, and then I will do it. And it's kind of then I feel like I used to write plays a lot before lockdown, and this is the now the lockdown thing that I do, or the COVID thing that I do. And I just, I exercise and try and be as creative as possible. That's my advice.
Cool. And Joe, do you have any tips for our audience?
I think sorry, I know I keep kind of, it's like self-promotion for help musicians, but we're working with music support at the moment, and we're partnering with them on piloting an app called Thrive, which is a wellbeing app, and it's got kind of NHS affiliation. It's the only wellbeing app that does, and I'd say that I'd encourage people to go to our website and try and download it, because I think there are some really good resources in there and really good tools, and it doesn't mean you don't have to exhaustively use it. You can find tips and techniques and things like that through the app that will help you. And more broadly, I think just if people can try and find even if it's writing it down, try and find a way of thinking about like balance in their lives, and just be aware when things potentially feel imbalanced, which I suspect most people's lives feel like at the moment, particularly working in music. But if you're aware of those things, if you're conscious of them, then there's things you can do about them. It's when factors feel like they're too much and they feel like they're overwhelming and all-consuming, that it becomes difficult to manage. So I think if you can maintain a level of awareness about these things, it's not going to solve everything, but I think it probably gives you a good chance of potentially working through whatever it is and trying to find what the best the best avenue for support is out there. And in all cases, if you're a musician and you want advice around that, call us and talk to us, because we've got a really brilliant team in the office who'd be happy to talk to you, and we'll spend as much time with you as we can.
Great. Yeah, and did you have any tips, Menno, that you wanted to share?
I have a lot of little tips from my touring days, but one that I've been trying to practice that I find helpful is planning things to do around the shows and days off that are not just sitting around a venue. And it is hard with long drives but depending on your capability of touring, like even if it's just a coffee shop, like yelping something around the venue, and it's not always easy. That's what's hard. Sometimes these venues are in the middle of nowhere, but as much as possible, just taking the time to do a little bit of research ahead of time and finding a thing to do to make your life seem a little normal. Like some of my favorite sound people who've just, I know people who've worked 7,000 or 8,000 shows in their lives, and just they tour 300 days a year. And those people who I know who've been able to do it, they really have a way to bring their routine on the road and make a healthy lifestyle part of it. And that doesn't mean like one of my favorite sound guys is his thing after is like go find a nice cocktail bar, but it's not just like get wasted at the venue. He's like, after the show, he's got this place he's gonna go and he's gonna try their Manhattan. He does it in all these cities, and it's like it's a classy way to do it, as opposed to like and then and like whatever you're into, like see the museums when you can, if you have a minute, or just to try to like give yourself some activity that's outside of sitting in a venue and staring at the wall.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate all of the tips that you've all given. I've been using the Thrive app as well, and would really recommend it to anyone.
Which one?
It's called Thrive, and there is a link to it on the Help Musicians website as well. And the thing that's been helping me in lockdown is a quick like mindfulness technique. And I was told you can do like pretty much any activity like mindfully, whether it's like going for a walk or like having a bath or just basically taking some time out for yourself. So for me, it's like having a cup of tea. And then whilst doing that activity, it's to think of, I think it's 5 things that you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things that you can smell or that you like the smell of, and then you take 1 deep breath. And it's kind of like meant to be a grounding technique that's been quite useful. For now, I just want to finish off by going to our audience question. So one person has written in that, as a BPD sufferer, my ups and downs come and go in a whole day. Sometimes I really struggle to motivate myself, even if I know I have a really exciting project going on. How would you combat that? Or any suggestions? Sometimes I listen to the projects that I have already done, but my brother thinks I'm being big-headed and having a power trip. So just any thoughts about that? I mean, my immediate thought is that it's not big-headed at all to listen back to something that you've made that you're proud of, and you should really just take that moment for yourself. I think, again, it's really helped me in lockdown to be like, oh yeah, like, remember when we did play that show, or we went to this place and like had a fun day off or whatever. Like, I was literally looking at Big Joni's like Instagram like highlights the other day, the saved ones where we were like on tour in November, just to remember how fun that was and stuff. And like, I don't think it's big-headed personally. Like, it's nice to think about times that you were happy, so I would do that.
I also am BPD, and it can be brutal creatively. The downs. I sometimes find listening to my own stuff when I am feeling. I often want to avoid it when I'm feeling really low, because I hate it. and nothing anyone can say or do makes it seem good. So that's one of my strategies is not listening to stuff, but also making new stuff when I'm in that zone can also sometimes help me come out of it. But my main, I guess, for being a musician is having being open with my friends and colleagues and my bandmates when you are having a low time and being given your space and them helping you in every way they can to help you get out of it. It's really important that they know what's going on. But yeah, if listening to your own stuff makes you feel better and you've made something great, hell yeah, listen to it. There is nothing big-headed about that. That's some of my favorite bands. Like it's kind of it often doesn't get publicized, but I know a couple huge bands that I know personally. I'm not going to say any names, who almost only listen to their own music. They only listen to other people's music to be able to hate it, you know. And then I don't even think it's big-headed. It's just a focus on their art that, you know, it's. And I think it's if that works for you.
Yeah. Did anyone else want to comment on the that question as well?
I work with quite a lot of young people that suffer from BPD, and I totally get that. What Menno's just said, like, you really need to say when you're having a bad time. I think that's kind of any person needs to see you having a bad time, because then people can be like, okay, I know I kind of know what they're going through. I know where they stand. I won't maybe say this to them today, or, you know, I'll be kind of more empathetic towards them because they've said that they're having a bad time. What I get some young people that I work with that have BPD to do is to kind of write a list of your projects. So write little things that you need to do to go towards the project, and if you can get that done, if you can tick one thing off your list, then you've done something great today. If you can't, there's still tomorrow. You can do that tomorrow. That's fine. And, you know, maybe going back and listening to projects on days you haven't done anything in that day is a way to say, well, I did that. I've done that. That's something that I have done before, and I will be able to do something again. And that's kind of the reassurance that you know, you have created things and you're able to create things and you will create things more. I know that I find writing everything down, even if it's the tiniest little thing to go towards your project, it feels amazing ticking it off, and then hopefully that'll lift your mood and it'll give you like a really big focus and you'll know exactly what needs to be done. Yeah, so I find that helps me, and that helps a lot of young people I work with.
Cool. And lastly, did you want to weigh in, Joe, quickly?
I don't think so, because I think that what Menno and El have said is amazing. I think, like, you know, and I think the you know, being open and honest as Menno has about his own experiences, but also highlighting potentially some differences that people experience in you know, with the same condition, that, you know, that's you know, evidence that we can all be quite different, but there are techniques and things that we can do that can be really helpful. And I think what I was suggesting was a really good idea, and I don't have anything to add to that. I think it's brilliant.
Okay, great. I think that actually takes us to the close of this talk. So thanks so much to the three of you for taking part in the panel today. I feel like I'll just come away with so many good points to think about and things to kind of enact in my kind of days going forward as well. And yeah, so it's just been really positive, and I hope that everyone watching has enjoyed as well. And yeah, once again, thank you to the Yorkshire Music Forum and the whole consortium. I won't go through all the names again, but thanks for sorting it all out. This has been really great. And yeah, so I don't actually know how to end the live, but I think someone's going to come